Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start in about 30 seconds. If people can find their seats, make themselves comfortable, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Are you going to read out that statement? Yes. That one that you've written. Is that all right? Yeah, it's fine. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the extraordinary meeting of the People's Scrutiny Commission. It feels a bit odd that we're in the council chamber, but the decision was taken to hold the meeting in here because we have webcasting facilities here. And we feel that it's absolutely vital that as many people as possible have access to seeing the discussion and the debate about something that is a very serious issue. So the main agenda item is the report of the Ofsted and CQC inspection back in the autumn on special educational needs and disabilities. And it is about looking at that report and looking at the way forward. So thank you for coming. Please make yourself comfortable. It is an hour-long meeting, so we won't be having a break. But if you want to come and go, that's absolutely fine. So we're going to kick off now with just some, the boring stuff, which is we are not expecting a fire alarm. If the fire alarm goes off, please treat it as real, and our fire exits are indicated in green at the back there and the door there. And at the back there. That's something we are unlikely to need. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Jill Kirk, who has double booked meetings, Councillor Harriet Clough, who is poorly, and Councillor Steve Smith, who is working and I think is actually in court today, so he really couldn't change things. So they're my apologies for absence. Any other apologies that we know of? And Councillor Jude English is going to be a bit late, but she is planning to attend. So item 3 is declarations of interest. Anybody from councillors or scrutiny members? Councillor Kent.
I just always make a brief declaration that a member of my family has an EHCP.
Thank you. I don't have any chair's business because this is an extraordinary... Oh, Councillor.
Sorry, I've not used one of these before.
Oh, sorry. I haven't welcomed you either, and that's very remiss of me. So,
don't worry about that.
Welcome to Councillor Tim Rippington.
Thank you. Just to say that my son has also had an EHCP.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. So, no chair's business because it's just an extraordinary meeting. However, the next People's Scrutiny Commission will meet on the 27th of February. So just for public information, if you wish to submit questions on anything that's come up today or on that Ofsted report, you are welcome to do so on the 27th of February, where our discussions from today and from our evidence gathering day will come back to committee. So I'd like to say thank you for everybody who's come today. Thank you to all the public forum submissions. This extraordinary meeting of People's Scrutiny has been convened so that parents, carers and all those affected can have a voice and engage in the scrutiny process. That is our primary aim. This is the first opportunity for people to discuss the Ofsted and CQC local area SEND report. We all know it's been delayed by a general election. Very annoying. But we're all here today, and I'm very pleased to welcome you and for us to listen to parents and families, and really grateful that officers are here to give feedback. You all have access, I hope, to the public forum submissions and answers to the questions. I think I've handed out a couple of printouts, but they should be online as well. So I'm going to move into public forum, but before I start, I'd just like to say that we know that this is a serious matter, and it's an emotional matter too. But I would like to encourage everyone to express their views and opinions in a way that there is no particular officer, teacher, or anyone singled out for criticism by name or in any other way. And that's just because it wouldn't be fair, as they have no right of reply. And we need to avoid any potential defamatory comments. So please also keep in mind that what is being said is being live streamed, because we want to be completely transparent, but just bear that in mind, just for legal reasons. So I would like to, without further ado, move to the public statements, and the first statement I understand is from Fiona Castle. If you just want to come forward, don't feel intimidated by a large chamber. It's just for practical reasons. Thanks.
Thank you. So in my statement today, I wanted to discuss my experience of support from Bristol City Council that is offered for children with SEND and their families. I've very recently been successful in securing a meaningful and specific EHCP for my son, along with, crucially, along with the financial provision for the plan. This process, which includes from the original application that we made as a family, has taken 65 weeks. It's included, I've written in my statement that it was 9 hours of meetings with councils, but actually it was 12 because I forgot about mediation. A week and a half of unpaid leave by myself, quite a few days of annual leave. We've spent over £3,000 of our own money on private assessments. And we've also had a successful appeal to the SEND Tribunal for refusal to assess. And that's quite significant when you consider that that was actually our only tribunal. So once we got past the refusal to assess, his application sailed through panel 2, and we haven't had to appeal provision either. And it has, without doubt, been one of the most arduous processes I've ever undertaken. I've written thousands of words in support of my son's application, and it's heartbreaking because you spend hours and hours writing words, thousands of words about what your child can't do rather than what they can do in order to secure provision for them. I've had a full frontal attack, opposition, in my opinion, opposition, from my son's school, and I believe it's because they're terrified of any further support for my son, costing them extra expenditure that the school simply couldn't afford. The whole battle, and I do use the word battle because that's what it's been, has affected every part of my life for the last 16 months and has a huge impact on my well-being. But more importantly, I've spent that time watching my son fall further behind at school, academically and socially. He's in a mainstream school and it's really tough for him. So we now have this wonderful plan and the provision and the financial provision, which is brilliant. However, I feel I should feel like the worst is over, but I don't. I feel like the battle's barely begun. My son and hundreds of children like him face a really uncertain and unsupported future in Bristol. I can't imagine him coping in a secondary mainstream without significant support, but I think we're going to have to fight for that. If he is not able to access mainstream education in the future, I know that currently all Bristol special schools are full, especially those for autistic children. And I think that any development of his future academically and his personal skills and his independent skills is going to be really hard won by me and my family. I currently have no faith in Bristol City Council to lawfully and ethically provide for my son, provide him the support that he needs to develop and lead a full life. Drastic and wholesale change is really needed by you. To provide me with any kind of reassurance that Bristol cares and will provide the support for my son's education that not only that he needs, but also that he is lawfully entitled to. And I just wanted to say that my dealings with the council you could easily look at me and think that this is just a single case, but I very much believe that what's happened to me is the rule and not the exception. The only exception being that in the end we've actually ended up with a half-decent plan and money to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Sarah Stocks.
Hello. I'm not going to read my statement to you because you will have been able to read that. What I would like to say, though, is that I would like to ask the Council what they're going to do about the fact that over the last 5 years, I and hundreds of other parents have watched their children not be provided for. There's now a cohort of literally hundreds of children in Bristol who have been through this period where things have gone so horribly wrong. Their files should now have a big red dot on them, and somebody from the Council should be going out to have a look at the damage that they've caused by their failure to assess, their failure to deal honestly and fairly and legally with the most vulnerable children in Bristol. You should go out and see what's happened and ask parents, how can I put this right? In some cases you can't, but you need to acknowledge that. Thank you.
And now I have a statement from Jen Smith.
I've submitted a statement, and what I'm going to do is give it some factual context with provable documentation. My son has an EHCP but hasn't been in school for over 2 months. So I'm just going to give you some excerpts of correspondence. None of this is identifiable. Me to school 2018. He does not have access to the disabled toilet, which he really needs due to his disabilities. He's been at the school over a month now and cannot go to the toilet. A chair of governors 2018. The same code of practice says that schools should consider involving specialists. It also uses words such as could, may and might in relation to involving other types of support. A school 2019. Regarding your child's attendance at the Year 7 residential camp, as I explained to you in our conversation, our assessment deems the risk to be too high for your child to attend camp this year. Families in Focus 2019. Other professionals believe mum is obstructing school attendance. Me to a school 2019. Is he being excluded? School. No, at the moment he's going home because it wasn't safe to keep him in school. Me. This is not lawful. This is 2 times I've had to pick him up now during the school day. A school head 2019. No, I'm sorry, I don't agree. I don't agree. At no point would we send your child home in an illegal exclusion. Current school and staff report. We believe that we have listened to mum and offered a range of adaptations to allow him to access education. Previous primary schools have alerted us to their concerns about mum, believing her to not always be acting in son's best interest. We are increasingly worried about mum's mental health and the impact on her son, although we have not been officially informed of this. Ofsted called the lack of accountability of leaders at all levels, including school leaders, a significant weakness, and our family experience backs it up. I've been on the rubbish end of Bristol Send for years. All I've ever wanted is for my children to be in school getting an education. I have come up against gaslighting, incompetence, dishonesty, discrimination, unlawful practice, and when you finally start to go public in despair, you end up with reports saying, impacts on her ability to make sound decisions regarding the welfare and education of her children. Because you have social care services with no experience of disability, academy schools with no accountability, a SEND team still not always following the law, and people don't like having their substandard, unlawful and discriminatory working practice challenged. It doesn't matter what you say or do here for the rest of today unless you actively challenge poor working practice like this, which ends up with SEND children out of education and families unfairly being labelled child protection concerns.
Can I just thank everybody who's made those statements? I know that that won't have been easy for you. And I really appreciate your honesty and your whole dignity in the situation as well. I don't think anybody can fail to take some of those comments extremely seriously. So thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to questions now. Question 1 was from Sarah McClelland, and Sarah, are you here? No, she's not here. Okay. The answers will be put up. Oh, just for the record, we will be putting those answers to questions on the website as well, just to make sure that any frequently asked questions, you know, are there for parents to look at. So, question 2 from Emma Boys. Is she here? Thank you.
I'm not a parent of a child with special educational needs, but I am a parent, and this is important to me. That's why I'm here today. In light of the significant weaknesses highlighted in the Ofsted inspection of SEND provision in Bristol and the large backlog in processing applications for EHCPs, how will you make a case to central government for the pressing need for additional funding? How will you demonstrate that every possible funding source within the Bristol City Council budget has been investigated and considered, and that there is still insufficient funding for the council to meet its legal and ethical responsibilities to children with SEND? Since funding has been taken from an alternative education budget to add to the SEND budget, how will you ensure that this money is ring-fenced, especially in light of reporting that the SEND funding for schools is already diverted to cover other unmet funding needs within schools, as common practice across the country? Finally, how will you ensure that there is sufficient capacity to process EHCP applications in a timely way so that a backlog does not appear again in a year or two's time?
Oh, just stay there, because you do have a supplementary if you want to, okay? We have an answer, a written answer. Does anybody want to add to that currently or go straight to the supplementary? Have you seen the answer? Have you received?
I haven't had a chance to read it in detail, I just scanned it. And it does say that the council is continuing to lobby central government, but I would be interested to know in what way and what the responses have been.
Okay, so is that your further question? Yeah. Okay. Who would like to respond to that? How we're, thank you. Use the microphone, Jackie. Cool.
The council has a policy team, and the policy team coordinates the links with central government on certain things, and the SEND funding is one of the issues that they have talked to government about over the last year. We have opportunities where we meet our colleagues in the DFE, our funding agencies, where, so for instance, we had a meeting in October last year, September, October last year, where we had DFE officials and ESFA, the school funding, who came to talk to us in Bristol, to talk to us about a few things, but SEND and SEND funding was one of the topics on the conversation. And we outlined the difficulties that we have, and that nationally we experience similar. We experienced similar to our national colleagues, and we explored that with them. We never had an answer, but we did have the opportunity to tell them. And at any opportunity that we get, we will continue to do so.
And just to add to that, we've obviously got the SEND review that's taking place nationally, and would absolutely see that as being an opportunity for formal consultation where we can air our concerns regarding the impact of the ongoing low funding.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. The Local Government Association put a statement to the House of Commons, I think, at the end of last week, asking for more money, welcoming the extra spend, but saying that that wasn't far enough. I'm really happy to give you the link to that response, which is a sort of national response from local government as well, if that would be helpful. Thanks very much. Thank you. So, question from Jen Smith.
So my original question was, the joint Ofsted and CQC SEND inspection raises significant concerns about the effectiveness of the local area. Whilst it is working on its written statement of action and spends 18 months attempting to improve SEND in Bristol, how is it going to replace the education missed by Bristol SEND children who have been excluded, off-rolled, dumped in unsuitable AP or unregistered provision or simply forgotten about, giving all those pupils affected by its own failure a chance to be adequately prepared for GCSEs and have a fair chance to pass exams?
Have you had your first answer written?
I haven't had a chance to read it, but I do have a supplementary question.
Yeah.
So my supplementary question is, there were a total of 98 complaints raised directly or indirectly about EHCPs during 2018 and 19. The council received 21 pre-action protocol letters. Those have to be paid for by parent carers going to a solicitor, with one of them going to judicial review. So given that only one of the 21 pre-action letters issued to the LA in 2018-19 went on to judicial review, does the council concede that it is placing unlawful obstacles in the way of children and young people getting the SEND support they are legally entitled to?
Thank you. Questions technically should relate to the initial question, but I will open that to anybody who would like to respond. Or would you like to respond to that later?
Yeah, I think given it's complex and not related to the original question, we'll respond to that in writing.
Yeah. Okay, you will get a response to that in writing.
If I can't get a response to that, could I just ask for someone from the council, go back to my original question, because you've given a response to parents, but what would you say to all the children and young people in Bristol directly? Because you talk to parents and carers when we talk to you, but it's being live streamed. What would you say right now to the children in Bristol whose education's been destroyed, like right now, who might be at home playing Roblox or self-harming or hurting themselves or just can't access education? What would you say to the children?
I'm really sorry. That's not it's a meaningful question, but it is not related to your original question. I think there will be very clear responses to that in general, but I'm not going to force officers to answer that. Sorry. So question 4 is Kirsty Cottier. Is she here? No? Okay. Right. I'm going to open this up. I'd like to thank people in the public gallery for their questions and statements and for everybody who's come. I also just, for information, I want you to know that this afternoon councillors will be attending an evidence gathering session, which is open to all councillors, which will look specifically at the provision of the EHCP, and that we've invited a number of expert witnesses to speak to us about that, about what a good EHCP should look like. And we have representatives from parents' forums, from our local education providers, and from local government policymakers as well. So I hope that also reassures the public that councillors are looking at this really seriously with regard to feeding into that written statement of action. So I'm just going to now open questions up to the Commission, who just, it's easier if you show your hands so that I can get you all in order. And we'll kick off with Councillor Eleanor Cumley. Thank you.
So before I ask my questions, I just want to say thank you to all the parents who've come here today, not just for coming and taking part and giving us your testimony, but also for the way you have been tireless advocates for your children. We have let you down, but you have not let your children down. So thank you. Right, back to business. The report identifies the churn in senior leadership as a factor that prevents us holding account across between organisations and to school leaders. Now, we know that the NHS has had this reorganisation of the STP forced on them from outside. But is there anything that we in the council as an organisation can do to kind of inoculate ourselves against the effect of this churn in senior leadership? Because we've seen so much change in structure and in personnel since 2016, which is since I became a councillor. Is there any way that we can kind of put systems in place to stop it distracting us from what matters?
I think it's a real challenge, isn't it, to get the right people in senior leadership posts. And we have seen 3 directors of education in recent years. And without that stable leadership, it is really difficult to hold things together. You're constantly firefighting. I think the inoculation is to get our recruitment right. And I would say this, but I do believe that we've got the recruitment right this time. I think we've, the councillors who made the decision to appoint our current Director of Education and Skills has done a good job. And what we can do is support our new Director of Education to the best that we can in the council to make sure that she feels that she wants to stay in the post. We've got to make sure the job is a doable job, and we've got to make sure that the job is rewarding. And I hope that the biggest difference will be the satisfaction in seeing a job well done. And that's what I'm sure everybody here hopes for.
And just to add to that, I think it's also the structure and the governance sitting behind individual people as well that means that we're actually going to be able to deliver against this. So in terms of the delivery group for the written statement of action, that's a significantly large partnership group cutting through local authority officers and health. They collectively are responsible for delivering the improvements required from the written statement of action. So I think taking it away from almost that single point of failure means that regardless of any churn, which hopefully there won't be, but regardless of any churn from a senior leadership perspective, actually there will be still able to deliver against those improvements.
Can I ask another? So I just wanted to ask about the HCP process. Now, I understand we've had a shortage of educational psychologists. Do we feel like that was a factor for this failure and that we are now getting to where we need to be in terms of staffing? So I guess that's a question for you.
So there are various different layers to be able to answer that question. And the first question is a national question. There has been a national shortage of educational psychologist training posts. It's a 3-year doctoral training, and there have been representations made about trying to increase the number of places on those training courses because we don't have the number of educational psychologists coming through that we need to be able to fill the vacancies across local authorities. We're now in a position locally where we've secured some new educational psychologists to come and work with us. And we've also developed some assistant psychologist posts as well to try and assist us with those various different issues around capacity. So we do have new colleagues that have started with us, and we have 6 educational psychologists that are coming straight from the training courses to work with us in September.
Ellen, are you happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Ruth Pickersgill.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank all the parents who've come. And I mean, I've known many of you over many years working in this area, so it does break my heart that we've reached this point, really. But I've got 2 unrelated questions, really. One is around the whole problem with academisation and the SEND agenda, because years ago it was reasonably easy to monitor how schools were delivering their SEND agenda. It's incredibly difficult to do that now. I'm wondering how going forward, how confident we are we're actually going to be able to monitor the quality of the provision in schools, but also where the notional SEND funding goes, not the EHCP funding, but the notional SEND, because I've been in many governor meetings where chairs of governing bodies have said, we have absolutely no idea where that SEND money that comes into our school goes and whether it goes on anything related to SEND. So that's kind of the first question. The second question going forward is, what structures can we put in place to ensure that parents and carers and disabled adults who've been through the SEND system are actually part of and co-producing anything going forward? Because clearly people don't feel they've been part of that, and I'm quite disappointed we don't have any disabled young people or adults here today to be able to speak about their experience. Well, I don't know, some of you maybe, but yeah, I don't know that. But I think we need to have structures in place to make sure that, you know, this doesn't happen again. And I think it probably worked a lot better in the past because we had those structures where parents and disabled adults felt they were able to inform and advise the authority. So those are my two questions.
Just in terms of the first one, first of all, and the perceived barriers that an academy status may have on SEND and possibly some of our wider inclusion agendas as well. In terms of the formal holding to account, the outcomes for children and young people sit with the council. So we absolutely, regardless of the status of the school, we absolutely have the right and the duty to hold every school leader and provision to account in terms of meeting those needs. We have something in the city called the Excellence in Schools Group, which is the standards board for the outcomes for children and young people. And historically, that has focused very much on the attainment and progress that you would maybe be measuring at the end of a key stage. As of the meeting last week, it has been unanimously agreed that SEND and the outcomes for SEND has to go absolutely at the top of the pile. And our discussion and holding each other to account as leaders across the city is around the inclusion agenda and around SEND. And without that, and on that standards board sits all of the leaders who are part of mainstream, part of special, part of academy, part of maintain. So it's the right people to be having that high level discussion that holds the system to account. So that would be my response to the first one. In regards to the co-production, absolutely agree. The system has not evolved and been developed through any sort of model of co-production, and that's a key part of one of the observations from the inspection in terms of our relationship and that confidence with our parents, carers and families. So one of the key objectives for the written statement of action is to actually drive forward a meaningful structure and system that is based on co-production and really start to ensure that the voices of our families, including children and young people, just going to comment earlier, is absolutely at the heart of what we do and how we do it.
Thank you. I mean, I think, you know, I know that you understand the issues because we've had conversations about it, but I really want to know how and operationally going forward, not now, but I want to see a lot more detail about how this is going to work, particularly around holding schools to account, because I haven't seen anything that gives me the confidence that schools, we can talk in any partnership board we want, but we actually need processes to really hold schools to account. And I've just already heard today how so many young people have been let down, and young people in my ward, parents come to me all the time and they've been let down. And actually, I know, there's lots of issues centrally, but some schools really need us to be in there holding them to account.
I'm hoping that the detail in the written statement of action and then the detailed action plan that sits behind it will start to answer some of those questions, because that's certainly the discussions that we're having at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Tim Kent.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to the parents who've come along here today. I had just two questions, really. First, I wanted to ask about the EHCP plans. So not the process, because we all know the situation regarding getting the plans processed through the system, But I noted in particular the inspectors said that the plans that do exist are not fit for purpose. And parents and carers say they are not worth reading. So I guess my real question is, because we have the senior educational psychologist here present, and of course it is the educational psychologist reports that are often at the heart of these. How can we be sure that future plans are going to have the full provision mapped out within them that they are fit for purpose and that they are worth reading?
Sorry, just before I hand over to Vicky, just a general one in terms of the quality. And I think when any system is in crisis, which is what this system has been in, it's very difficult to look at all of the different elements and have the time needed in order to ensure that there is that quality assurance. So we have invested in a quality assurance process, plus the additional capacity in the team will mean that actually the process itself, although one of the aims is to hit the timeliness, statutory timeliness agenda, there is that time to actually make sure that the process itself is fit for purpose, so that actually what is released at the end of that is something that is worth having.
So what we're hoping to do and what we're aspiring to do is to look at the whole process and the needs assessment process and actually try and move away from that being more of a paper-based process to being a far more interactive process. So we've had some restructures and streamlining within the SEN team, and one of the outcomes of that is now we have a specific team that is just looking at the initial assessments. The aspiration is that our SEN officers will be out at the start of the process, working with families alongside the educational psychologists and other professionals to actually co-construct the documents as we work our way through.
Thanks. I guess my second question is that the report does highlight that there is improvement, and that probably for the last 2 years that SEND is beginning to turn the corner. But sort of says that a lot of this is just not known out there by parents. I just want to give you an opportunity to perhaps to point to 2 or 3 specific areas of those improvements so we can all learn together.
I think certainly the improvements that I've seen and that was highlighted through the self-evaluation form that was very transparent and very honest, that was given to inspectors at the start of the process. One of the areas I certainly think will have a big impact will be the joint working that I mentioned earlier, and particularly the strengthening and improvement in joint provision and joint commissioning to make sure that we have the data, which is a piece of work that's being worked on, but we have the right data and the right people around the table that are able to make decisions that are not only making sure that the provision is right for now, but actually is looking ahead, and that work's beginning to happen, that you're looking ahead to see what is needed going forward, and that we have the decision-making systems in place to be able to make those longer-term strategic decisions, because I think we're very well aware of the issues and the pace of improvement that needs to happen at the point we are now, but actually as part of this running parallel has to be the strategic decision-making powers that make sure we are not back round this table in 2 years' time when the written statement of action has been delivered because we've just kept a very narrow view of what it is that needs to happen. So the joint working and that collective responsibility I've experienced since joining the council to be really quite profound.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Celia Phipps.
Again, I'd like to thank the parents for coming and telling us their stories. I'm just thinking about the children themselves, and have we thought of ways that we can absolutely directly engage with children to tell us what they would like out of a system? I know that can sometimes be challenging, but it's very important to work in a co-produced way with the children themselves.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really critical point. And as much as we are strengthening the co-production with our families, with our parents and carers within our families, it is the voice of the child or young person that absolutely has to take centre stage on this. We're working very closely with the Youth Council, who have SEND written large in their current manifesto that will take them through the next 2 years, and working very much with the Equality Working Group with the Youth Council to start addressing some of this. And they are, as much as they're giving their opinion and their advice, they are absolutely holding us to account in terms of some of the current failings in that system.
And moving forwards as well, we absolutely want to be hearing the voice of all our children and young people, not only as part of their needs assessment process and their annual reviews. We'd like them to be commenting wider on actual processes and how we can make sure that person-centred planning is at the heart of what we do moving forwards.
Thank you. Judith Brown. Or can someone help?
Right, okay. I don't think there's anybody in this room who doesn't wish it hadn't been necessary for you to come here today. It wasn't easy for you, and you were wonderful. But I'm wondering if you could tell me how many parents there are on the SEND Partnership Board. Because if there aren't any, I would strongly suggest that you have some co-opted onto it, because officers work very hard and do their very best, but sometimes it's useful to have the views of somebody who's actually experiencing what these parents have experienced.
Yes, just to confirm that the SEND Partnership Group, which is the group I mentioned earlier, that's driving forward the written statement of action, has the Parent Carer Forum representative.
Thank you. Perhaps the Director of Education could just really explain that SEND board so that everybody knows what that partnership board looks like and look at that issue, please.
Yes, the SEND Partnership Group is the formal group of partners, and the Parent and Carer Forum is the official link forum that represents parents and carers on behalf with the council. In terms of the actual co-production itself, there are a number of sessions and groups that are currently taking place and will take place up until the written statement of action is submitted. And I think that is also the groups where a wider voice can be heard if you're not already linked into the formal parent and carer group.
Councillor Jude English.
Apologies for being a bit late. I did send you a message.
Yeah, we've mentioned that. Thanks.
Actually, Alison, hi. Could you just explain that last sentence a bit more clearly to me? Because in some ways, I need a little bit more detail. So the SEND Partnership Board meets how often?
The SEND Partnership Group meets monthly, and they are officers and representatives from schools, and the Parent Carer Forum Bristol's Parent Carer Forum have a representation, and their role is to develop and deliver the written statement of action, and part of that is ensuring that that written statement of action has had ample opportunity to be co-produced by parents, carers, and there are a number of sessions taking place across the city. They have taken place, they will take place between now and when the written statement of action is submitted.
Okay, that's a bit clearer. So what's the relationship between that and the Schools in Excellence sub-board of the Learning City Partnership, which I think you mentioned earlier, which you alluded would be kind of looking at how schools are accountable, and how often does that particular Schools in Excellence board meet?
So the Excellence in Schools group, that's another term for it is a standards board. So every council has a standards board, and that is looking at a far broader remit than just SEND. That meets every 6 weeks and is going to prioritise SEND as part of the way of working going forward. So it's not directly linked to the SEND partnership group. However, I chair the Excellence in Schools group. I now co-chair, along with a colleague from Health, the school SEND partnership group. So that link is absolutely there. And then the SEND
so
partnership...
that link is you?
That link is me, yes.
But the Excellence in Schools group is within the Learning City Partnership kind of collection of boards and things, or not? It's a separate thing. It's a standard board. It's not. It's a different thing, is it?
Every local authority has a school standards board. Not every local authority has a Learning City board. It's part of holding the school community, and it's where the local authority and the Regional Schools Commissioner can work together with the school community.
So who sits on that one then?
The Excellence in Schools group. So on the Excellence in Schools group, there's representation from all of the phase chairs. So all of the different phase councils have a represented chair. They're part of that group. Some of the chief executive officers from the larger MATs are on there. Regional Schools Commissioner representation is on there as well, plus officers.
Thank you.
Councillor Pickersgill.
Sorry, if I can just have one more. I mean, what's striking me about a lot of this conversation is that we need to go back to the starting blocks in a lot of cases. And I wonder whether it's possible for every single officer who's involved in this process to have a basic training around inclusion that includes the voice of parents, the voice of disabled young people, and a disability equality and race equality perspective, that we design a training that will kind of take us back to the place we want to be, to the values, person-centred place that we want to be. And I know the psychology service in the past has run really brilliant training around inclusion that always did include the voice of young people, the voice of parents. And I wonder whether that's something we could do again to kind of really indicate a new start and everybody coming from the same perspective of equality and disability equality.
Thank you. You raised something that's really close to our hearts and the work that we want to do. And most certainly as part of the written statement of action, we're looking at workforce development, and we're looking at workforce development across the whole city. And we're looking at the key messages that this code of practice is ensuring should be driving our practice. And that's very much going back to the issues and debates around inclusion and equalities, and making sure that across the board we've got the right information for the right colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Massey.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Pickersgill's points, it's occurred to me that we may well be having a group of new councillors coming in May, and as part of the basic induction training, it would probably be quite useful to include something about this on their training, particularly as ward councillors quite often are the first point of contact for parents. So could we include that in the basic training?
I think that's an excellent idea. I think you've given us a really good précis of what an EHCP is looking like, and I think that, yeah, I think personally I'd want to see that incorporated into the training package for new councillors. Want to comment on that? Up for that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a really good idea, Councillor Massey. Thank you. Okay, and talking of new councillors, Councillor Tim Rippington, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, and I apologise if this question might be a bit off the mark for this committee, because I've only been here for a week and I have no idea. I haven't even read, you know, all the background paperwork, I'm afraid, but I have got a lot of experience in this area. But my question is, if we've had such a backlog in EHCPs that we don't know what the requirements are because the EHCPs aren't in place, what impact has that had on our planning for provision? And do we know this year, for example, what the mismatch is because it's all very well to get your EHCP completed, but if that provision that is then stated in the EHCP is not there, you know, it's almost a worthless piece of paper. So do we know what the mismatch is between the requirements of the HCPs that have been backlogged and need to be ready by September, and how much provision there actually is?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about also doing that horizon scanning and looking at what the need is currently and what the need is going to be going forward. So part of the work that we are undertaking is to do a full review of sufficiency across the city, so looking particularly at the use of alternative learning provision, what the need is at the moment, what the gaps are, looking at hospital education and looking at special schools. So what we need to do is make sure that we have identified the current need, anticipated the future need, and then made some decisions in terms of how to increase that provision so that we don't end up with a lot of EHCP plans with recommendations that we can't deliver.
And do we know, you know, when the timescales are that you're hoping to have that review done?
The review is due to kick off probably in about 2 weeks. We're just securing who's going to actually lead on that. We've got the funding to drive the review, so we're just last couple of bits of organisation, and then that needs to happen. That needs to be one of the first things we do, because we've really got to get a very clear sense of what the current issue is and what that's going to need going forward.
Councillor Gollop, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Claire. No, just listening to Tim's point there, and I was thinking, I'm trying to get a picture of the magnitude of the problem, and I'm just wondering how many EHCPs were outstanding at the 31st of December, and if there are, and clearly there are a number outstanding at that point, how one can quantify the gap that Tim was referring to if we haven't even developed the plans. I'm just trying to understand how the process works.
So at the moment we've got, it's just shy of 500 plans that are in the system. They're not all legacy plans. That includes all of the new plans that have come in over, you know, on a weekly basis. So there's the backlog plus the new plans that have come in place. Within those plans, it won't be that the outcome will be that child or young person requires a specialist school or specialist provision. It's about making sure that the right resources are identified, whether that's being delivered within a mainstream setting or whether there is actually specialist settings required. So really part of that process is making sure that the provision is identified and then that the funding follows that provision in a timely manner. I think, you know, historically families have experienced quite a delay between the recommendations coming out through the EHCP and then the funding being put in place in order to deliver it. So really part of the sharpening of the whole system isn't just about delivering in a timely manner, but it's about making sure that we're responsive to the resources and the funding that follows those resources and getting them out quickly as those plans are issued.
Yep, Councillor Gollop, you can come back on that.
Well, and thank you for that. And my comments aren't critical of the team that are now in place in turning this round. So I just want to make that clear. But is it possible that members can actually have a quarterly summary that actually shows the number of new EHCP requests, the number that have been dealt with, and the progress? Because I think this appears to now be a significantly improving story, but it would be good that that information is available and we can see the continued direction of travel.
Absolutely. So we will be providing a detailed report quarterly, hopefully through the scrutiny process. And I think, to be honest, I think I share some of that frustration in terms of that transparency of data. And I think particularly the data and the story that's sitting behind some of the headlines that will take longer to show improvement. And so now that we've just completed quite a significant data cleanse. We have one version of the truth. I know some of the criticism previously has been that numbers change. We have one version of the truth. That is the That's the data that will be submitted to the Department for Education as part of the annual Send To return later on this month, and that is the data that we will show our progress on a quarterly basis in order to bring far more transparency to your critical analysis of the improvements. We'll also be publishing that on the local offer in a timely fashion as well, so parents and carers can actually see that improvement journey.
Councillor Kent, would you like to come back?
So can I just follow that question up then? Because I guess my concern is, how quickly do you think you will clear what we're now calling the backlog of EHCP plans? I mean, I note that last quarter, I think 167 were completed, which is a remarkable improvement compared to the beginning of the year. But if there's roughly up to sort of 600 EHCP applications, let's say, put into the system each year, that means at best you're going to take years to clear the backlog, unless you're planning to step this up each quarter. And if so, what's the sort of the target plan to hit each quarter for clearing EHCP applications?
Yeah, we haven't actually pinned down a specific date yet. That is a piece of work that's in train at the moment. What we have done, I think the term stepping up is absolutely what is happening. Obviously, we've recruited 21 out of the 23 new posts. They're currently completing their induction at the moment, which means we've over doubled the size of the team. So if you think of the improvement that we've made in terms of issuing reports, okay, not within the 20 weeks, but issuing reports has almost tripled, I think, since Q4 last year, that actually with the doubling the size of the team, plus the efficiencies that we're going to be introducing and have introduced with regard to the actual processes, which I think is often what we get tied up into, it should have a significant impact on actually producing those reports, clearing the backlog, and then being in a position, along with the increase in educational psychologists, to actually be in a manageable position as a council.
Any more questions from the Commission? Yeah, don't apologise, Judith. Judith Brown.
It's just a very short question. These meetings that you're going to have before the plan of action is finally written.
I don't think your mic's on again. Can someone please help her with a microphone?
Sorry about that. Put it down to old age. If you're having a series of meetings before the plan of action is written, how will parents know where they're being held and when they are?
I'll look to Vicky to check to see I've got this right. My understanding is that all of the details are on our local offer website, and that they're being advertised as well through the Parents and Carer Forum.
I'm really sorry, but I am really trying to chair this properly, which means that questions from the floor should have been submitted earlier. I'm very happy for those questions to be submitted to be answered later at the next forum, and we will take those up at the next commission, but technically the public forum is closed. I'm really sorry about that. I will allow I'll be really honest with you. It's very difficult to chair a meeting without getting emotional. And so I will allow short comments from the floor. Ms. Arby, if you'd like to comment.
Okay,
I'm really sorry. Having 5 children, 3 with disabilities, I did not get a chance to submit my question in time. I also run community organisation that supports 80 family from BAME community, specifically the Somali community, who have got high incident of autism, who got more and high incident of autism. So my apology of not getting the question in time. My question is, which I have asked so many times,
just a statement.
Statement is families who don't speak the language, who don't understand how the system works, are excluded. As I said earlier, I am fortunate to sit here today and be able to hear and take part this, but over the 80 families that I work with will not be able to be included in this process. So first, they didn't have a chance to contribute to the consultation of the inspection, and now they continue to be excluded in contributing to the action of statement. How does the officers plan to include those that are very voiceless and marginalised in our community? That is a bit that I will have to keep saying, because I am one out of hundreds of families from BAME community who do not have access into our system despite of our makeup of our current administration.
Thank you. I will personally take that issue up, Ms. Arby. Thank you. We are short for time. Any statement now has to be less than 30 seconds. So I just take it in order. You won't get a response, but you can make a comment.
I just wanted to say that the councillor over here, I'm sorry, I didn't know his name, he asked about the number of EHCPs that are going through. That's just only half the battle. What about the number of annual reviews that are overdue? And there's an enormous backlog in those. That was my statement.
So Bristol currently has just short of 3,000 EHCPs or thereabouts. We've just heard that there's another 500 coming through the system. You have 8 new EPs, but not coming until September. It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And statistically, in Bristol, 42% of children with EHCP plans are in special schools. So, I mean, this is beyond a critical crisis now. This is an emergency. 42% of approximately 500 children, or even if only 300 of them are issued plans, which is likely to be more, where are these children going to be placed? There's no school places. The bomb has gone off, and it's just everyone's like quietly stepping around it. What is happening?
I'll take that up. Thank you.
You keep mentioning the Parent Carers Forum. You know, none of us are involved with that. They're obviously ineffective because they're not asking you the right questions. They're not holding you or anyone to account. They're not talking to us. We don't know how to feed into that. So that's a major issue. If you keep using that as a point of reference, you know, it's ineffective.
Thank you. I will also take that up. Now we're coming to the end, but I am really glad that we've got 3 cabinet members here, and I'd like to invite Councillor Anna Keane, who's Director of Cabinet Member for Education and Skills.
Director, gladly. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Just on that point, Kerry, that whenever I've met with the chair of the Parent Care Forum, I've always been told, which is why I've commented, and they're not here today, so I can't ask them about it at the moment, but I've always been told that all families who have a child with SEND or beginning this process are involved there. And so that's always been, so you can probably understand from our point of view that if that's what we're hearing from a parent of a child with SEND, that there's a significant involvement and that there's a lot of outreach done by that group. Obviously, we want that to be done amongst parents and the involvement to be there. That's really important for us to hear, because that's from you. That if that isn't the case and there is a lack of involvement, as you've spoken so clearly about, that's absolutely something we'll go away and look at, because as you've rightly pointed out, that's been a key point of contact for us on partnership groups. And if that's not representative, or there is some, again, the person's not here to sort of give their side of things, so I'm cautious about what I'm saying, but if that's not happening for whatever reason, then we need to sort of look at that. The other thing I just want to say about involvement, and we obviously really welcome this from you, but particularly from your children and other young people that you know, is also about the best way that they feel they can access things. I mean, my own children will tell me that, like, you know, they never look on websites, so that isn't necessarily the right forum for them, and they, you know, that may be that we have feedback about apps being used or whatever. I don't want to be the one to suggest things, because it needs to come from the young people, not from us. Likewise, what you need as families needs to come from you, not from what we think is useful for you. So all those things we'd really sort of welcome. There is going to be a sort of central point on the local offer website, but again, I mean, it's, you know, when I've taught for a long time and I didn't know what like a local offer meant. It doesn't sound like it's something to do with SEND. I don't know how accessible that is to anyone if you're going into this as a first time as a parent. And I think you're absolutely right as well, that this very much today and other engagements need to very much be part of a series of meetings, because I expect for a lot of you, it's been really difficult to get here today. You know that you're just a very small number of people, because you've all got children that need to be looked after, and you've also, so then will be working people that can't be here today. So really appreciate the way you've probably rearranged all sorts of things to get here. But yeah, it's very, we're really, really aware of what that's involved, and the fact that you are speaking for a lot of other people, and as many voices as possible coming forward is extremely helpful. What we should see is an EHCP process which is reflective of what families and young people need, not what we think should be done. So all the involvement you can give, we'd really welcome.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, everybody who's made the effort to travel here especially. As the chair, you have to be slightly detached, but I'm just going to be really honest now. I am a parent who has experienced a child not being diagnosed with their special educational needs. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I felt a failure as a mother. So I do understand what some of you are going through, because every outstanding EHCP is a child whose needs are not being met, and that is a family that is not being supported. And we cannot measure the toll on that family and that child. We can't measure that by money or by stuff that we support them with. That is time lost that we don't get back. And I just know that everybody here holds that in their minds as they grapple with the issue. It's a huge issue that's facing us as a city. And for as long as I am chair of People's Scrutiny, which may not be very long, but as long as I am, we will keep looking at this until we've got it right. So I'd like to just thank everybody for their honesty and their commitment to seeing things improve. We will take all of your statements and the feeling with which it comes into our evidence gathering day this afternoon. And be assured that councillors, will be taking this really seriously, and we are looking to make things right. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you.